Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the dim, paper-walled stillness of a 17th century samurai estate. You're not a visitor here. No, tonight you are the newest and least impressive member of a respected samurai household. You've barely been accepted into the ranks. That's why you're sleeping on a thin futon in the servant quarters, rolled out on a straw mat floor that creaks every time you so much as think about shifting your legs. And before you get too cozy. Well, you probably won't survive this. Not because you're in any immediate danger, but because this routine is relentless. No Netflix, no snooze button, no oat milk matcha latte waiting politely on the nightstand. Just the persistent call of duty, dignity, and discipline, and maybe a few too many rules about sandal placement. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before the sun. Not metaphorically, actually before the sun. There's no dramatic sunrise through paper screens, no poetic rooster crowing. Just a hollow clack, the sound of the head servant's wooden clappers, Hayoshigi, banging outside your room in slow, echoing pulses. That's your cue. And no, you don't get to ignore it. You're expected to be vertical in under 30 seconds, kneeling respectfully before your futon is even halfway rolled up. Your breath puffs slightly in the early chill, and you can see it. A thin mist curling upward in the silence. The walls are made of paper. The windows are also paper. Surprise, the insulation is also paper. You slept fully clothed in your underrobe just to avoid becoming a human popsicle. And still, your toes are numb. Somewhere behind another sliding door, an old man who's been awake since before dawn is already preparing tea. You hear the soft clink of a ceramic cup and the unmistakable scrape of a whetstone against steel. Everyone else in the compound is ahead of you. Again. There's no one barking orders, just the heavy weight of expectations, like a perfectly balanced katana gently pressing against your spine. You kneel. You bow. You fold your bedding like it's a sacred scroll, even though your arms are still asleep. One crease wrong, and someone might quietly unroll it and refold it just to make a point. No words, just a quiet correction. Very samurai. Your joints crack like tiny fireworks in the stillness. You're 24 years old, but already move like you're 84. That's what sleeping on straw and practicing sword forms every day will do to you. You're wearing a plain juben, a cotton underrobe that clings unpleasantly after last night's sweat and this morning's frost. The floor is somehow both scratchy and slippery. And there's dust. Always dust. Despite the daily sweeping rituals, the floor manages to generate its own dust, probably out of spite. By now, your knees ache from kneeling so long. But standing without the proper gesture, without centering yourself, breathing in, bowing again, is a mistake. Everything here is a gesture, a ceremony. Even stretching your back in the wrong direction could earn you a sideways glance from someone 3 ranks above you. Outside your thin sliding door, the corridor creaks softly with the shuffling of other students. One of them clears his throat in a way that sounds judgmental, although it may have just been phlegm. Still, in this house, even phlegm can feel like a critique. You finally open the screen and shuffle into the hall, head lowered, eyes not quite making contact with anyone else's. Everyone is quiet, not solemn, trained. The silence isn't accidental, it's practiced, refined, as if any stray word might accidentally wake the ancestral spirits still meditating somewhere above the ceiling beams. Now you walk barefoot down the corridor. The tatami mats whisper under your heels. You try not to think about how desperately you need to pee. That comes later, everything in its place. First, the water ritual. Historians still argue whether most samurai homes required this precise order of morning rituals, or whether it varied by region and school. But what we do know is that waking early and beginning the day in silence, mindfulness, and discomfort was absolutely the vibe. This wasn't about comfort. It was about control. You reach the courtyard. The sky overhead is a dull ink-wash gray. No birds yet, just the faint crackle of wind brushing dry pine needles against the stone path. The cold hits you again, this time right in the face, because now it's time to cleanse. A row of simple wooden basins sits along the edge of the garden wall. Inside each, water that has been sitting out all night, which is to say, it is now freezing. You kneel. Again. You scoop, and you splash, and instantly regret everything. The water slaps your face like a tiny ghost has just challenged you to a duel. You sputter slightly, but hold back the sound. Someone behind you, probably Kenji, who never seems cold, scoops and splashes with the serenity of a tranquil mountain stream. You hate Kenji a little, but you also admire him, which is how most feelings work around here. The cleansing is not about hygiene. It's spiritual. Physical discomfort becomes a tool, a way to push your awareness out of the dream state and into the very real, very chilly present. You rinse your hands, then your face, then dry with a rough cloth tucked inside your robe. You look up, and for the first time this morning, you see the faintest tint of gold at the horizon. Dawn is finally, reluctantly, arriving. But you've already been awake for nearly an hour. The sun is late. You are not. A senior student bows deeply at the entrance to the main hall. You bow too, mirroring the exact angle. Too low, and you look like you're mocking someone. Too shallow, and you look arrogant. There's a sweet spot, around 30 to 45 degrees. And yes, they will notice. The rest of the house begins to stir now, more openly. A thin line of smoke curls from the kitchen chimney. A quiet knock on the weapons room door indicates that the caretaker is unlocking the armory. You smell tea brewing. Matcha, the earthy kind, not the sweet cafe version you're used to. It smells faintly bitter, like your mood. You walk back toward the hall for robe check. Today, the master may or may not inspect your knotwork. You pray your obi, the cloth sash around your waist, isn't twisted. That would mean starting the whole process over. And no, you don't get privacy. Dressing here is half martial training, half synchronized dance. You've got to memorize dozens of ways to tie fabric, some of which exist only to make you suffer. You sigh quietly, adjusting the collar of your underrobe. It's going to be a long morning. And you're only just out of bed. The water is still dripping from your chin as you shuffle back inside. You're not supposed to wipe your face on your sleeve. It would suggest sloppiness. You let the last frigid droplets trail down your jaw and vanish into your collar. Welcome to cold water and colder discipline, where even your shivers are subject to scrutiny. Back in the changing room, everyone is silent. There's no banter here. No jokes about the weather or complaints about the water. Just the soft rustle of fabric and the occasional polite cough, delivered somehow with samurai precision. You move to your assigned corner, your folded robe waiting precisely as you left it the night before. Dark blue, linen blend, neatly arranged. Not because you're tidy, but because your last robe arrangement was corrected by a sharp-eyed senior who refolded it without speaking, then gave you a bow that somehow managed to be both respectful and deeply condescending. So now you double-check the angles. Is the left flap really over the right? That's important. Right over left is how corpses are dressed. A deeply unlucky mistake. You don't want to start your morning routine dressed like a dead man. Symbolism matters around here, possibly more than actual function. Sliding into your robe is not like putting on a bathrobe. It's more like participating in a very polite, cloth-based wrestling match. The inner robe goes first, then the outer one, sleeves lining up just so. Then comes the obi, the belt that secures everything. It's not a one-knot-fits-all situation. Different knots mean different things. You're expected to use the correct one for the time of day, your rank, and the specific activity you'll be engaging in. You'll be sitting, walking, bowing, maybe sparring. Your obi must be tight enough to hold your form, but not so tight you faint during calligraphy. And then, the swords. You are not allowed to wear them indoors. That's for formal outings and emergencies. But you are expected to maintain them. Carry them properly, place them with care, always handle the short one, the wakizashi, before the long one, the katana. Today, you're assigned to display duty, one of the junior roles where you take cleaned blades from their storage rack and place them at the front alcove of the hall. This sounds simple. It is not. Each sword is placed with the blade facing upward and the handle to the left. Why the left? Because that's the position which makes the sword harder to draw, a gesture of peace. And if you place it on the right side, you're suggesting you might draw it. That would be rude, even aggressive. No pressure, though. You lift the first katana with both hands, your fingers careful not to smudge the lacquered scabbard. It feels heavier today, though of course it's not. Maybe your arms are just still mad about yesterday's misstep in form practice when you blocked a strike with your face. Bruised cheekbones aside, you're lucky the senior didn't break your pride entirely. You place the sword down, adjusting the angle, then check it, then recheck it. Then don't adjust it again, because that would look indecisive. You bow. A full, slow bow. If anyone was watching, and someone always is, they now know that you are trying at least. You rejoin the others, kneeling in a line. The room is dim, but beginning to glow slightly as pale light leaks through the rice paper screens. It's warmer here than outside, but just barely. The floor beneath your knees is unforgiving. You shift slightly, trying not to make a sound. You fail. One of the seniors flicks their eyes toward you. That's all it takes. A single glance to reignite your internal monologue about posture, etiquette, and whether your kneecaps will ever forgive you. The master enters with the silence of a ghost. You don't hear him come in, you feel it. Everyone straightens just a hair, not a sound, just the brush of his soft sandals against the mat. He sits, you bow. Now begins the robe inspection. He says nothing, just slowly looks down the line, one by one. You don't breathe. Well, you do, but it's the type of breath that could be confused for a windless sigh. He stops briefly near Kenji, of course. Kenji's robe is perfect. His obi knot looks like it was tied by a celestial being with a PhD in geometry. The master says one thing today. Then he nods once. Everyone bows again. Robes pass inspection. Historians still argue whether daily robe inspection was universal or only common in elite martial schools. Some suggest it was more about mindfulness than uniformity. a daily chance to recommit to discipline. Others say it was power theater. Either way, it feels very theatrical. You still have no idea what the meant. Next comes the personal discipline check, a quick lineup where seniors may or may not offer silent corrections. You're not even told what's being evaluated. Could be the angle of your bow. Could be the way your big toe is sticking out from your sandals. Could be your energy. Your energy seems sloppy today. One senior once whispered at you. What does that even mean? Your vibe was out of alignment. You still think about it. To the side, two servants bring in a wooden tray with the morning tea. It's bitter, earthy, and utterly unsweetened. You bow before taking it. Sip slowly. Show appreciation without grimacing. That's the trick. Now comes the real test. Senior Ichiro walks by each of you and mutters one word. Just one. To you, he says, posture. You want to disappear? He's right. Your shoulders are tight. You've been hunching since the water ritual. But still. Posture. It's like being judged by a ghost in a very judgmental mood. You adjust your spine. Slowly. Correctly. One vertebra at a time. This is the moment in a movie where the music would swell. But here, there's no music. Just the sound of your joints realigning themselves with a painful sigh. At this point in the day, you've been awake for 2 hours. You've done exactly nothing that the modern world would define as productive. No emails sent, no cardio completed, no avocado toast prepared. Just an endless sequence of precise symbolic gestures, each of which could earn silent correction or silent approval. It's a mystery which one you're receiving. And yet, oddly, it's working. The ritual has slowed your thoughts. You're not thinking about your to-do list or your social reputation. You're thinking about the way your robe sits on your shoulders, the way your hands hold the teacup, the exact point where your knees meet the mat. You're in the present, completely, miserably, miraculously. The master clears his throat. Everyone bows. He nods again. You are now officially prepared to face the next step in your day. Not battle, not sword training, not even breakfast. No. Next comes meditative sword maintenance. But for now, your robe is crisp, your shoulders are straight, and the tea sits quietly in your belly like a warm rock of approval. Don't get cocky, though. You're still on thin tatami. Your knees are pins and needles now, but you're not allowed to stand yet. Not until the master rises first, and he's clearly savoring the pause. Finally, with the rustle of aged silk and the whisper of straw matting under sandal, he stands. Everyone bows once more. That's your cue. You rise like a marionette pretending not to have back pain. You don't groan. Groaning is for peasants, or worse, dramatists. Just a controlled breath through the nose and up you go. Now begins your most peaceful, yet perhaps most maddening daily task. The cleaning and maintenance of your swords. It sounds like it would take maybe 5 minutes. Wipe the blade, oil it, done, right? Nope. This is going to take a full hour. You shuffle to the small maintenance room, kneeling once again, because this whole life is a knee endurance test, and unfold your cloth mat. Laid out before you is a neat set of cleaning tools. A powder ball made of silk and deer hide, soft rice paper squares, a pinch of clove-scented choji oil, and a tiny brass hammer. Not for hammering, mind you. That would be insane. It's for carefully removing the bamboo peg that holds the sword handle together, like a surgical tap. You take a breath. You've done this before, but you still feel nervous. The sword is not just a weapon. It's an extension of your soul. That's not poetic fluff. you've heard it whispered a dozen times during instruction. If your sword rusts, your soul is lazy. If your sword squeaks, your focus is scattered. If your sword breaks, well, hopefully you break first, because that would be less embarrassing. First, you inspect the blade. The master says to treat it like a mirror of your discipline. You hold it at an angle, letting the soft morning light ripple along its curve. The edge, though rarely used in peacetime, must still gleam like moonlight on still water. Any cloudiness, any hint of a fingerprint, that's a mark of shame. You dab the powder ball gently across the flat of the blade. It leaves a faint white dust, which you then swipe away with a soft cloth in long, even strokes. This isn't cleaning. This is a spa treatment. For steel. Next comes the oil. Just a tiny amount. Too much and it gums up. Too little and the blade might dry out. One narrow strip drawn across with rice paper like you're painting with scent. The oil smells oddly comforting, faintly floral and medicinal. If lavender and discipline had a baby, it would smell like this. Now, the handle. Here's the fiddly part. You gently tap the bamboo peg loose with the brass hammer, your other hand cradling the hilt. Once it's out, the handle slides free, revealing the bare tang of the blade. You inspect that too. Even the hidden parts must be clean, especially the hidden parts. There's an old proverb whispered during this part of training. Honor is what you do when no one sees your tang, which, admittedly, sounds weirder in English. Everything passes muster today. You reassemble the sword with reverence, reseat the peg, and give the blade one final bow before sheathing it again. The katana is ready. Now, the wakizashi, shorter, lighter, but no less needy. Repeat everything. Knees still numb? Too bad. Around you, the other juniors are doing the same, heads bowed in unspoken rhythm. One is muttering softly, perhaps a mantra, or possibly swearing under his breath at a stubborn peg. You pretend not to hear. It's not polite to notice another's spiritual unraveling. Historians still argue whether sword maintenance was truly a daily task for lower-ranked samurai, or whether this ritual was reserved for ceremonial swords. Some accounts suggest daily cleaning was impractical given the swords weren't used every day. Others argue that daily ritual kept the warrior's spirit aligned and prepared. Either way, in your school, it's not optional. Even if the swords sit on a rack most days, they must always be ready to gleam. Once both swords are pristine and resheathed, you place them on the lacquered wooden rack beside your mat. Blades up, hilts left. Always. There's a quiet pride in this moment. Your back is straighter now. Your hands move more confidently. You may not be the strongest or the most precise, but today your blades are flawless. You bow to the rack, then stand slowly, very slowly. Your legs are cold and stiff, and for a second you wonder if this is what being 90 years old feels like. You do a kind of dignified hobble toward the outer corridor. Breakfast is soon, but first, the calligraphy board. This part of the morning was added by the headmaster 2 decades ago as a way of encouraging mindfulness through the brush. You think it's also a test of patience, of legibility, possibly of secret emotional balance. You kneel again, of course, and unroll the day's proverb on the wall. Today's phrase, even the still pond reflects the storm clouds. Cool, vaguely threatening, encouraging. Maybe you dip your brush in the ink, which smells sharp and smoky, and try to copy the characters with focus. Each stroke must be slow, deliberate, and confident. No hesitations, no wobbles. You've seen the seniors do it. It looks like magic. Yours looks like a frog slipped in ink and tried to write a breakup letter. Still, you finish your version, bow to the brush, and place your scroll beside the others. No one comments, but one of the instructors gives you a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Progress. Now, finally, it's time for food. You file into the dining area, another low hall with clean mats and low wooden trays. Breakfast is simple but oddly elegant. Miso soup, a small bowl of steamed rice, pickled vegetables, and a slice of grilled fish. The portions are modest, but each item is beautifully arranged. You sit Caesar style, knees folded under again, of course, and wait. No one starts eating until the headmaster lifts his chopsticks. When he does, it's like a spiritual starter's pistol. You lift yours too. The soup is warm, salty, and gently briny, like the ocean got cozy. The rice is soft, sticky, but perfect. The pickles challenge you, but you eat them anyway because that's what discipline tastes like. Sour, crunchy, and faintly resentful. You chew slowly. That's part of the practice. No gulping, no noise, no multitasking, just eating, quietly, gratefully. At the end, you bow again, not just to the headmaster, but to your tray, a show of thanks. Gratitude is not optional. It's woven into the meal. You are now, technically, ready for the day. You've had no caffeine. You've barely spoken. Your knees are in open rebellion, and your swords are sparkling clean. So far today, you've survived cold water, public posture shaming, surgical-level sword cleaning, and philosophical calligraphy. And somehow, despite all the quiet terror, you feel calm. Is this peace? Or just the early signs of exhaustion? Too soon to tell. But you'll need that calm. Because next comes sparring. You finish your last grain of rice with the reverence of a monk handling sacred relics. Place your chopsticks down just so, and rise. Slowly, carefully, the way someone might step out of a very judgmental hot tub. Breakfast is done, and your stomach is warm, but not full. That's intentional. A full belly makes for slow reflexes, and slow reflexes in the next part of the morning could get you bruised, or worse, embarrassed, because now it's time to spar. You follow the others out into the dojo courtyard, an open space surrounded by low buildings with sweeping tiled roofs. The sun is higher now, cutting crisp shadows on the worn wooden floors. There's a light breeze, and the sound of sandals whispering over wood. The air smells like cedar and faint sweat. The kind of scent that would be sold today as samurai discipline in a cologne nobody quite understands. You and the other juniors form a line. Not stiff, never stiff, but aligned, like reeds swaying together. Across from you, your partners stand, waiting. Each morning, matchups are chosen with all the mystery and menace of a lottery no one wants to win. Your name is called. You bow. So does your opponent. He's about your height, slightly broader in the shoulders. You've sparred before. He's fast, favors feints, and once made you bite your own sleeve. You remember. Today's match will use bakken, wooden swords. Much safer than metal, but not exactly soft. Think of being hit by a wooden sword as a firm reminder from the universe that you're mortal, and sometimes clumsy. You step into position. The courtyard falls quiet, except for the breeze and a bird who's chosen this exact moment to heckle you from a nearby pine. The instructor calls the command, and you begin. It's slow at first, circling, testing. You've been taught to move like water, not like fire. Fire is loud, wasteful. Water waits. Water wins. He strikes. You parry. The wooden blades meet with a satisfying thwack, and the vibration runs down your wrist. You move again. Step, angle, breathe, block. Your world narrows to just this dance, the rhythm of footwork, the tension in your calves, the flick of his wrist. Then he fakes left and swings right. You see it a half-second too late. Your block comes up, but not quite fast enough. The Bakken smacks your shoulder with a meaty thud. Not a real injury, but enough to make your teeth click. You reset. Bow. Begin again. Sparring is not about winning. At least, that's what the instructors say. But you've seen the older students track their victories. You've seen the quiet fist pumps. Still, your goal this morning is simple. Don't cry in public. This time, you manage to land a clean tap to his side. Nothing dramatic, but it earns a nod from your opponent and a quiet good from the instructor, which might as well be a standing ovation. As the rounds go on, your breath comes harder. Your feet ache. Your sleeves darken with sweat. But something else happens too. You stop thinking. The noise in your head fades. All the worries, knees, sword polish, that one crooked brush stroke, they blur. There is only breath and movement. Historians still debate whether real samurai sparred like this every morning, or if this kind of structured dojo training was more common in peaceful Edo-era schools than in the warring Sengoku period. Some scholars argue the most battle-hardened samurai scorned such rituals, relying instead on raw instinct. Others insist the daily sparring formed the backbone of their legendary discipline. You, right now, don't particularly care. You're too busy not getting whacked in the kneecap. Your final match ends in a draw. You both land hits at nearly the same moment, and the instructor lets it pass without comment, which, in this world, is essentially high praise. You bow again. Your arms tremble slightly as you return to the line. Now it's time for kata, the solo forms. Like choreographed dances with invisible enemies, kata are all about precision, balance, and restraint. They're also a chance to look incredibly cool, or mildly ridiculous. You step forward, bow, begin. Each movement is slow, deliberate, carved from the air like calligraphy with your limbs. You draw your sword, well, your bakken, as if it's the last time. You pivot, slice downward, step through, twist. The motion is hypnotic. You're aware of your breath, the creak of your uniform, the occasional waver in your wrist that screams, "I am still learning." There's a sequence in your kata where you spin and strike downward in one breath. It's tricky. The last time you tried, you nearly clipped a fellow student who had to pretend he wasn't startled. Today, you nail it. Almost. The angle's a bit off, but it's clean. You bow to finish. There's no applause. Just that same quiet nod from the instructor. And honestly, it feels better than a round of clapping. You return to the line, breathing deep. Your heartbeat begins to slow. The wind picks up, and a single leaf dances across the courtyard like it's showing off. You briefly envy its flexibility. Sparring is over. But the day isn't even halfway done. You file out, bare feet whispering on wood, and make your way to the armory room, a dimly lit storage hall where armor is checked, repaired, and cleaned. Not every school insists on this, but yours? Absolutely. The armor may not be worn today, but maintaining it is as essential as brushing your teeth, or your sword. Inside, the armor is arranged on wooden frames, breastplates polished to a soft gleam, helmets with intimidating crests, gauntlets that clatter like insect shells. You find your assigned set, not full battle gear, but enough to feel like a tin can with delusions of grandeur. You inspect the laces. Some are silk, some hemp. You're looking for frays, mold, or signs of rust on the metal plates. The lacquered portions need dusting. You use a soft cloth and the world's gentlest touch. Your armor smells like sweat, cedar oil, and effort. There's a tiny dent in your shoulder guard. You tap it gently with a padded mallet. The sound is oddly soothing. If ASMR armor repair ever becomes a thing, you'd be first in line to host. Once the armor is checked, you store it carefully and bow to it. Yes, really, because even armor has a spirit. By the time you're done, your arms are jelly and your mind is a puddle. You could nap standing up. But there's one last stop before the midday rest. Herbal compresses and injury checks. You shuffle into a side room where an older instructor waits, surrounded by little ceramic jars, woven baskets, and bundles of dried leaves. He has the exact energy of someone who's seen 1,000 stubbed toes and knows all your secrets. He nods for you to sit. He checks your wrists, your knees, your shoulders. There's a faint bruise from that early match. He applies a cool herbal compress that smells like mint and ghost stories. He tells you, without looking up, you're favoring your right foot again. You nod, because he's right. He always is. There's something deeply comforting about this part. Like the school itself knows it pushes you and has built in a little apology. A healing pause. You leave the room wrapped in herbs and pride. The rest period is short but blissful. A few minutes to sit in the garden, sip barley tea, and watch dragonflies argue over a koi pond. Your legs still ache, your hands still tremble, but you feel clear, like a mirror just wiped clean. The morning is finally over, and while the sun climbs higher and the world outside the dojo bustles with the noise of rice merchants and gossiping villagers, you sit in stillness. Because this, strange as it seems, is peace. Even if your knees still don't agree, the stillness doesn't last. You barely finish your last sip of barley tea when a bell rings. 3 soft chimes, spaced like polite reminders. It's the signal for philosophy and calligraphy practice. 2 seemingly gentle activities, often underestimated by newcomers, until their forearms cramp and their brush strokes resemble confused worms. You rise, feet stiff, joints murmuring their grievances, and walk across the compound toward the study hall. It's a long, low building with paper-covered doors and the unmistakable scent of ink, aged wood, and roasted barley. Inside, the air feels heavier. Not unpleasant, just thoughtful. The kind of air that makes you want to speak in lowercase. You settle onto a floor cushion. In front of you, a short writing table, a tray of tools, and a sheet of rice paper as blank as your current thoughts. The inkstone waits, a rectangle of quiet dignity, and next to it, a ceramic water dropper shaped like a tiny gourd. Your brush is soft and supple, made from the tail hairs of a horse who, you hope, had a fulfilling career. Before writing, though, comes the lecture. The instructor sits cross-legged at the front, a man whose voice flows like rain tapping on bamboo. Today, he recites passages from Hagakure, the Book of the Samurai, offering the commentary between lines. The way of the samurai is found in death. Not the most relaxing opener, but you've heard it before. He elaborates, not on dying, but on detachment, about living with clarity, as if you've already let go. You're pretty sure your sore shoulders are halfway there. He moves on to Zen koans, those maddening little riddles meant to untangle your brain by tangling it first. Today's favorite, what is the sound of one hand clapping? You think, probably the same as your calligraphy yesterday. As he speaks, your mind drifts, but not far. You follow the cadence of his words like a lazy river. Occasionally, he poses a question like, "Can the sword be kind?" No one answers aloud. That's not the point. The question just floats there, like incense smoke, meant to season your thoughts. Eventually, he nods. The lecture ends. Now, you write. You grind your ink first. Slow circles with the ink stick against the stone, mixing with water from the dropper. The motion is meditative. In fact, some historians argue that this part was more valued than the writing itself. The process, not the product. Historians still argue, the instructor once said, whether calligraphy was a form of training, worship, or self-discipline. I say yes. You dip your brush. Your task is to copy a proverb, not just legibly, but beautifully. Not just beautifully, but with intention. Every stroke has breath in it. You begin, Chi Xuan Bi Ba Chiki. Fall 7 times, rise 8. You botch the first character. The brush twitches, and your 7 looks like it slipped on ice. You try again, and again. Each time, your breath slows. Your posture settles. You realize your tongue is sticking out slightly, as if that will help the brush behave. It doesn't, but you keep doing it anyway. There's a rhythm here. Dip, stroke, lift. Dip, stroke, curse gently under your breath. You start to enjoy the whisper of bristles on paper, the light scent of pine in the ink. Outside, a bamboo stalk knocks softly in the breeze, like nature's metronome. After half an hour, your arm aches, and your best attempt still looks vaguely like a chicken tried to write kanji. But the instructor passes behind you, glances once, and murmurs, "Better." You beam like a toddler handed a sticker. The next task, freeform brushwork. Express a concept, not a word, not an image, an idea. Today's prompt, patience. You think of sparring. You think of the moment before striking. You think of mornings that stretch longer than expected. Your brush moves. The result is abstract, slightly chaotic, but something about it feels honest. You're not sure what you captured, but it came from your shoulder, not your mind. Others finish at different paces. The room grows quiet, save for the gentle sound of brushes swishing in rinse cups. One student's piece looks like a graceful bird. Another's resembles an angry cabbage. Both are praised. Your own is set aside to dry. Now comes tea and reflection. Not the tea of meals, but a formal pause. You are served matcha, thick and green, like moss in a porcelain bowl. The instructor says nothing, only gestures for you to sit in silence. Let the tea cool. Let your thoughts steep. You sip. The flavor is earthy, bitter, calming. The kind of taste that reminds you you're alive, but not in a loud way. More like a librarian tapping your shoulder. You're told to write a few lines of self-reflection on a fresh piece of paper. Your hand cramps at the idea, but you obey. You write something simple. I was impatient with my wrist. It did not help. This is not poetry, but it's true. Next to you, a student writes a haiku about a spider in their tea bowl. You wonder if it's metaphorical. You decide not to ask. The session ends with a bow. You file out, legs slightly numb, but your mind oddly clear. Like someone rinsed your thoughts under cold water and laid them in the sun to dry. The sun is nearly at its peak. Shadows are short. The bells for midday meal ring soon. More rice, more pickles, and perhaps, if the cook is generous, a slice of grilled fish with citrus peel. As you head to the dining hall, you pass the garden. A crane stands near the pond, still as a painted scroll. You try to match its calm for 3 full seconds before your foot cramps. Midday meals are quiet, not because of etiquette, but because everyone's a little exhausted. You eat slowly, letting the pickled plum jolt your senses back to life. Someone mutters that the fish is overcooked. Someone else mutters that they're too tired to care. Both are right. After lunch, a brief window opens. Free study. You can return to writing practice, reading from the scroll library, or, if you're bold, request a one-on-one session with a mentor. You opt for the scrolls. Inside the tiny library, the shelves creak like old knees. You run your fingers along the spines. Bamboo-bound, faded ink. Some titles rubbed nearly blank. You select one at random. It's about the use of fans in courtship rituals. Not swords, not tactics, just flirty fans. You sit and you read. Apparently, different ways of holding or closing a fan could express everything from "I'm interested" to "please stop talking." There was even a gesture for "my father is watching." Some samurai moonlighted as poets and used fan language to communicate secretly with lovers during festivals. You try to imagine a grizzled warrior delicately fanning himself to send a romantic signal across a summer crowd. The image is delightful. You wish this were part of today's training. Maybe tomorrow. Before you know it, the scroll is back on the shelf. The bell rings again. Time for the afternoon drills, a different kind of challenge. But that's for later. Right now, you roll your shoulders, step back into the light, and think, just for a moment, that if being a samurai is this exhausting before sunset, you're probably not surviving a full day. Still, you're making it to the next part. And somehow, that feels like a victory. The afternoon sun presses down like a warm hand, and your legs are just beginning to forgive you when the next bell chimes. Not the polite chime of breakfast. Not the reflective hush of calligraphy. No, this is the clang of afternoon drills, where everything smells like sweat, pine, and stubborn pride. You shuffle your way to the drill yard, where dust curls lazily in the breeze and bamboo fencing lines the perimeter. The area is simple. Packed earth, a few straw targets, a rack of wooden training swords, bokken, and an instructor with a gaze that can slice soup. He nods once, and you line up with the others. The sun glints off the top of your headband. The wooden sword in your hands feels heavier than yesterday. Or maybe your arms just haven't caught up to the rest of the day yet. The first drill is kata, a choreographed series of movements, each strike and stance preordained, like a deadly dance written centuries ago. You're expected to perform it perfectly, though perfection feels about 500 attempts away. Begin. You step forward, slash diagonally. Pivot. Raise your sword to block an imaginary blow. There's a rhythm to it, and when it clicks, it's almost musical, until your foot catches on a rock and your deadly stance becomes something closer to a stork having a minor episode. The instructor says nothing, just stares. You bow. Continue. In the background, a younger trainee is working on footwork. His steps are precise, his form polished. You try not to feel envious. He probably didn't have to copy patience with a horsehair brush earlier today. Each pass of the kata grows smoother. You begin to forget the weight of the bokken. Your body, warmed by repetition, settles into the task. But then your wrist twinges, the same one from calligraphy, and the sword dips too far. Again. Historians still argue whether kata was meant as practical preparation or more of a mental exercise, a way to cultivate discipline through repetition, even in motions never used in real battle. You suspect both sides are probably right, Or perhaps they just needed to get people to stop complaining and move. After half an hour, the drill shifts. Now, partner practice, but no sparring yet, just paired motions. One person attacks with a slow, controlled swing. The other blocks, steps aside, and counters. Ideally, it looks like two waves folding around each other. In practice, it looks like two tired people bumping sticks. You're paired with the same student who wrote about the T-bowl spider earlier. He's taller, wiry, and suspiciously polite. You suspect he's the type who writes poems in the bath. "Strike," he says. You do. Slowly. He blocks with a satisfying clack. Again. This goes on for a while. He corrects your stance once, gently tugging your elbow into position. You mumble thanks and try not to trip over your own sandals. Eventually, the rhythm sets in. Clack, step, block, breathe. Your mind begins to wander, but your body keeps moving. You're reminded of the instructor's earlier words. The sword must become your shadow, not your burden. Right now, it feels more like an annoying cousin, but the sentiment is appreciated. Finally, the instructor calls for a break. You drop your bokken, carefully, and flop onto a low bench near the well. Cold water is ladled out into small wooden cups. You drink deeply, and the liquid tastes like melted mountain. Nearby, a group of students debates the correct grip for overhead strikes. One insists the pinky finger is key. Another says it's all in the hips. A third quietly eats a rice ball and nods at everything. Wise. The break is short. Soon, the sparring circle forms. This isn't a free-for-all. No wild swings or anime-style flourishes. Each bout is a slow-motion chess game with bruises. Strikes must be measured. Steps deliberate. You're paired again with the T-Spider. He bows, and you bow back. A faint smile plays at his lips. You assume it's confidence, but it might just be gas. The match begins. You circle. Your bokken held at mid-guard. He feints left, then taps your shoulder with the flat of his blade before you even finish blinking. Point to him. Again, the instructor calls. You try to focus, anticipate, trust your reflexes. This time, you block his strike, barely. It rattles your wrist, but the motion holds. You swing in return, and he dodges without effort. "You're stiff," he mutters, not unkindly. "No kidding," you reply. He taps your ribs. Point to him. The third match lasts longer. You parry, step, nearly land a blow to his arm, but he spins and slides out of reach. The bout ends in a draw, and you're breathing hard, hands slick with effort. Still, progress. As others spar, you watch from the shade. One student performs a perfect disarm. Another gets lightly tapped on the head 3 times in a row. He sighs, bows, and sits. Across the yard, 2 instructors demonstrate advanced forms. Flourishes and reversals too fast to follow. You stare, enthralled, and wonder if your wrists will ever forgive you enough to reach that level. When drills end, a short lecture follows. You gather near the instructor, seated in the dust like students at a campfire. He speaks of zanshin, the mental state of relaxed awareness, of being fully present even after a strike has landed, even after the fight is over. It's the idea that a samurai is never truly off-duty. There's always a thread of attention running through him like a wire. You nod, trying to feel zanshin, but mostly you feel sweat collecting behind your knees. The lecture ends with an unexpected question. What does it mean to win? Someone answers, to survive. Another says, to protect. A third, to improve. The instructor only smiles. Good. Now stretch your hamstrings. The post-drill stretching is both a blessing and a curse. Your body is grateful. Your muscles are suspicious. The student next to you tries to touch his toes and makes a noise like a bagpipe in distress. You don't stretch far, but you stretch honestly. You count that as growth. With the sun tilting toward late afternoon, the drill yard clears. You place your balkin back on the rack, bow to it. Yes, even the wooden sword deserves respect. And walk with aching grace toward the washhouse. On the way, you pass a shrine tucked between trees, barely larger than a mailbox. Inside, a little ceramic fox sits, ears perked. Someone's left it an offering, a coin, a rice cracker, and, curiously, a tiny origami crane. You pause, bow slightly. Maybe later you'll fold one, too. Right now, your shirt clings to your back. Your headband smells like onions and regret. The washhouse awaits, and while not quite a luxury spa, the prospect of warm water and silence feels close to divine. You made it through another round. Arms sore, mind quiet, heart somewhere between determined and delirious. A full day? Still doubtful, but a full afternoon. You survived that. And in this dojo, that's worth at least a mildly approving nod. Your feet are dragging by the time you reach the washhouse, a low-timbered building tucked behind the kitchen, where soft steam spills out beneath the eaves, and a line of gaita sandals waits like loyal dogs outside. Inside, the air is thick with humidity and the faint scent of cedar and old soap. You slide open the door and bow your head. Not to anyone in particular, just out of habit. Even in the bathhouse, there's protocol. Relaxation is a ritual, too. You step onto the raised wooden floor and find a space along the low stools beside a line of shallow buckets. A few other students are already here, sleeves rolled, quietly scrubbing their arms with long-handled brushes. One hums. Another nods hello. There's no chatter, no giggling, definitely no splashing. This isn't recess. This is the sacred rite of getting unsweaty in the least disruptive way possible. You begin with the bucket, a ladle, a pour over the shoulders. Cold at first. It always is. It shocks you into attention, which feels rude, frankly, given how hard your muscles are lobbying for a nap. But once the water hits your spine and races down your back, there's an undeniable reset, like wiping the slate of your entire day clean. Next, the soap root, mashed into a soft paste. It smells earthy and possibly like radishes. You rub it between your palms and begin scrubbing your arms, then your legs gently. Any leftover traces of rice porridge, ink blotches, or splinters from wooden swords, gone. You glance sideways and notice that one student is methodically cleaning beneath his fingernails with a toothpick. That's dedication, or trauma. Historians still argue whether samurai were truly as fastidious as legend suggests. Some accounts describe obsessive hygiene. Others point out the practical limits of cleanliness in a wooden world without plumbing. Perhaps it varied by clan, or maybe by proximity to a mirror. You finish rinsing, bow your head slightly to the faucet, because why not, and tip another bucket of water over yourself. This time, the water's warm, almost too warm. You exhale slowly, eyes closing. Then, the part you've waited for, the soaking tub. It's not big, maybe 5 or 6 people at a time, but it's deep, crafted from cypress, and the water is hot enough to startle a confession out of a stubborn spy. You slip in slowly, trying not to yelp like a startled tanuki. The heat climbs your legs, wraps your waist, and eventually eases around your chest like a very wet hug from someone you trust but who doesn't understand personal space. You melt, quietly, respectfully. This is the only place where time seems to slow. The hot water draws tension from your shoulders like a thief in reverse. Your knees float slightly, and your hands, resting on the rim of the tub, seem foreign. How are these the same fingers that dropped a tea ladle this morning? You overhear a soft conversation between two older students across the tub. They're debating the philosophical implications of spitting in one's helmet before battle, a tradition said to ward off fear. One claims it symbolizes owning your courage. The other says it's mostly superstition and bad helmet etiquette. You lean your head back and stare at the beams above. Someone's carved a poem into the wood in neat, tiny script. Steam rises from stillness, so too does the warrior's calm. You exhale, you get it now. A few minutes later, a bath attendant, yes, that's a thing, lightly taps a bamboo rod on the wall. That's the signal. Time's up. You bow once again, why not? And climb out, toweling off with a cloth that is, let's be honest, more symbolic than effective. The changing room is cool, shaded, and lined with folded yukata, light cotton robes. You slip into one, grateful for the gentle softness against your skin. No armor, no splinters, no ink stains. You are, temporarily, a clean and unburdened soul. Back in the open air, the sun has begun its long exhale toward the horizon. Shadows stretch like cats along the ground. A breeze stirs your damp hair. You feel almost human. It's not over, though. Clean doesn't mean idle. You join a small group gathering near the garden wall. It's time for afternoon chores. In theory, these are meant to instill humility and responsibility. In practice, they test how well you can look enthusiastic while doing manual labor with a broom made of twigs. Today, you're on rake duty. The courtyard gravel has been disordered by earlier footsteps and a mischievous chicken. You take up a wooden rake and begin redrawing the lines. Smooth, straight, meditative. 1, 2, pull, step, repeat. It's strangely satisfying. A monk walks by and gives you a slow nod. High praise. Nearby, a pair of students gather herbs from the small garden. Shiso, mitsuba, and some plant that looks suspiciously like it could be either seasoning or poison. You make a mental note not to complain about the soup tonight. Another student is picking up leaves with a pair of long metal tongs, one by one, like an overly polite crane. He sees you watching and shrugs. Discipline, he says. Or punishment. Hard to tell anymore. Chores rotate every few days. Some luck out with lantern cleaning, others get firewood duty, which is more axe, less ambiance. The worst, you hear, is latrine inspection, especially during plum wine season. But today, raking is your path to enlightenment. As the lines take shape, you start to see patterns, waves, circles, a shape that might be a turtle. You lean into it, and by the time your section is finished, it almost looks intentional. Almost. One instructor pauses to inspect your work. He squints, then gives the faintest nod. Not enough to cause hope, just enough to suggest you haven't disgraced the lineage. You'll take it. The bell rings again. Time for evening meditation, and your legs groan in protest. You consider hiding behind a shrub, but no. This is the samurai way. You straighten your yukata, wipe your brow, and head for the zendo. As you walk, you realize something startling. You don't feel quite as sore. Your back still aches, sure, but there's a looseness to your limbs, a steadiness to your steps. You're not thriving, but you're existing, and that's almost respectable. You arrive at the meditation hall, the floor cool beneath your feet. Cushions are arranged in perfect rows. You sit, cross-legged, hands resting in your lap. The instructor taps a bell. Silence. No birds, no wind. Just you, your thoughts, and the soft creak of someone trying not to sneeze. You inhale, exhale, and for just a moment, the day is distant. The Bakken, the rice, the spider story, all fading into the background hum of your brain shifting into idle. You smile, barely. You made it through the afternoon. Clean, tired, weirdly proud. And you only dropped one thing. The bell chimes again. Clear, high, and slightly too optimistic for your liking. Meditation's over, which means only one thing. Dinner. You rise from the cushion on legs that no longer belong to you, but to a creature made entirely of creaking wood and poor decisions. You shuffle toward the mess hall, driven not by hunger exactly, but by the promise of sitting down and not moving for at least 25 minutes. Inside, it's warm and dim. The smell hits first. Miso broth, charred scallions, and something that might be fermented turnip or someone's feet. You can't be sure. There's an earthy umami fog in the air that says nutritious more than delicious. You join the queue with your lacquered tray, standing behind a student who has managed to braid his top knot into an actual fish shape. He doesn't speak. He just stares ahead, jaw tight, like a man who's seen too much millet. Tonight's menu includes a square of tofu, gently wobbling in its own nervous sweat, a few pickled burdock roots, a heap of white rice that's somehow simultaneously sticky and dry, and a small cup of miso soup. So hot it defies all known laws of thermal equilibrium. You take your seat on the tatami mat and tuck your legs under the low table. The etiquette here is simple. Don't talk with your mouth full, don't complain, and whatever you do, don't comment on the rice texture. Someone got sent to clean out the chicken coop for that last week. Dinner begins with a communal bow, followed by the phrase itadakimasu, a humble thanks for the food, the farmers, and whoever didn't undercook the daikon this time. You lift your chopsticks and begin. The rice is fine, edible. The pickles are aggressively sour. The tofu tastes like someone described flavor to it from a distance. But the miso soup is oddly comforting, like a warm sock for your soul. Even the floating bits of seaweed seem to be cheering you on. Halfway through, someone near you quietly sighs. This tastes just like last night. Another replies, because it is. No one laughs, but several nod solemnly. You wonder how long it would take to develop a craving for boiled radish. A week? A month? Historians still argue whether taste buds evolve or simply surrender. To keep yourself amused, you mentally rank the week's side dishes from most tolerable to please, no. Surprisingly, the winner is the sesame spinach, which only appeared once, like a benevolent spirit. The loser? The yuba skin rolls, a texture you'd describe as wet scroll parchment. You finish your meal, bow again, and help collect trays. No one gets to vanish after dinner. Cleanup is communal. You're assigned to bucket duty, which involves dumping food scraps into a wooden bin destined for the compost pile, or possibly as surprise ingredients for tomorrow's stew. It's best not to ask. After dishes, there's a brief recess. 15 minutes to do anything that doesn't involve sparring, chores, or speaking above a whisper. Some students stretch. Others write calligraphy. One is attempting to teach a cricket how to jump through a ring made from a rice straw loop. You quietly cheer for the cricket. You wander out into the garden. The sun has dipped low, the sky the color of old persimmons. A few lanterns flicker to life, their thin paper walls glowing gently in the dusk. Somewhere nearby, a bamboo fountain knocks rhythmically, the sound impossibly soothing. You follow it to a small clearing where an old wooden bench sits beneath a maple tree, its leaves beginning to tinge red with the coming season. You sit. For the first time all day, your body is still. You tilt your head back and watch as the stars begin to nudge their way into the night sky. No swords, no rice, no bowing. Just you, the rustling of leaves, and the soft sound of someone trying to suppress a hiccup behind a shrub. It's tempting to stay here, to let your eyes droop and drift into a sleep laced with soy and shame. But the day isn't done. Not yet. The evening lecture awaits. You return to the main hall where a senior instructor, gray-haired, serene, and with the disapproving energy of a man who once sharpened his calligraphy brush into a weapon, waits beside a scroll stand. He gestures for everyone to sit. The topic tonight, the virtue of stillness. He begins slowly, his voice like a stream weaving around stones. He speaks of control, patience, and the power of silence. He tells a story about a samurai who once stood still for 3 entire hours during an ambush, just to maintain the element of surprise. You try not to fidget during this anecdote, but your leg has developed a pulse of its own. Then he poses a question. Which is braver, the one who draws their sword or the one who does not? It's rhetorical. You think about it anyway. Maybe the real strength isn't in the flash of a blade, but in the endless repetitions, the dull chores, the tofu, the bowed heads. The willingness to live the same morning again and again, and still greet it with a sense of duty, or at least passive-aggressive acceptance. Someone sneezes. The lecture ends. You bow, again, and shuffle to the hallway where lights-out prep begins. Candles are extinguished, lanterns dimmed. You retrieve your bed mat from the wall rack, a thin, unforgiving rectangle that makes you nostalgic for rocks. You find your assigned spot in the sleeping quarters, roll out the mat, and retrieve your sleeping yukata, soft from repeated washings and just slightly damp. You change in near darkness, careful not to step on anyone's mat. Stepping on someone's mat is considered a grave offense. One student did it last week and was reassigned to latrine inventory. No one knows what that entails. No one asks. You lie down, stare at the wooden beams above. Listen. There's a low hum of night insects outside, a rustle of straw from someone turning over, the faint hiss of wind between the shoji slats. You exhale. Today was long, weird, full of unexpected tofu and emotional turbulence. But you made it. And tomorrow, you'll rise before dawn. Again. Maybe this time you'll remember your hakama ties on the first try. Morning comes for the 4th time in your short samurai tenure, and somehow it feels both predictable and mildly insulting. The bell rings, again, and you lurch upright, already suspicious of what fresh bowing opportunities await. Your calves ache from yesterday's stances, your wrists from misjudged sword drills, and your soul from the realization that free time just means slightly less structured obedience. You shuffle out into the crisp morning air, eyes half-lidded, muttering something that's probably a greeting, or perhaps a quiet plea for coffee, which hasn't been invented in your part of feudal Japan just yet. Instead, you'll be starting the day with the most thrilling of all samurai rituals, laundry hour. Yes, before swordplay, before philosophy, and definitely before breakfast, comes the washing of clothes, done in the communal bathhouse courtyard with icy, stream-fed basins and soap that smells faintly like regret and crushed azuki beans. You squat beside your designated tub, dunk your linen training robe, and begin scrubbing. It's humbling work. The fabric resists, the cold bites, and your fingers slowly become less useful appendages and more decorative icicles. One student hums an off-key melody beside you, something meant to be soothing, but with enough sharp notes to double as a weapon. The instructor overseeing this blessed chore is a soft-spoken man who's rumored to have fought in 3 wars, and once won a duel without drawing his sword. His job now is to make sure you don't leave suds in your sleeve folds. He takes this very seriously. You begin to wonder if you've ever properly cleaned anything in your life. When the garments are finally rinsed, you wring them out, drape them on bamboo racks, and gaze toward the horizon like a war-weary character in a film that hasn't been made yet. Somewhere, someone drops a wet sock. It lands with a slap that echoes with existential despair. After laundry, it's time for quiet movement practice, which is a pleasant-sounding name for walking around a courtyard in slow, controlled steps while balancing a tiny ceramic cup filled with water on your head. You line up with your peers, cup carefully positioned on your crown, and begin to move. Heel first, then toe. Arms lightly at your side. Posture perfectly upright. The goal here is to develop both physical balance and inner discipline. The cup should not tremble. Your mind should be like the still surface of a pond. Your reality, however, is more like a startled goose on a trampoline. Each step is a miniature crisis. Your thighs burn, your shoulders twitch, your cup shimmies with a malevolent agenda. After 3 paces, you manage to slosh some water down your neck. By step 5, you're wet, cold, and considering whether you can simply evolve into a less upright species. Focus on the breath, the instructor intones, floating past like a benevolent ghost in tabby socks. Be present with the step. Merge with the earth. You are definitely merging, though mostly with shame and discomfort. The student ahead of you is infuriatingly good at this. Graceful, serene, not a ripple in their water. You suspect them of being part bird, maybe heron. You glance to your left and notice someone's cup has slid off entirely and is now being discreetly hidden behind a sleeve. A bold choice. Historians still argue whether creative concealment was a punishable offense or just clever crisis management. Eventually, the exercise ends, not because everyone succeeded, but because the instructor's tea break approaches and he takes that very seriously. You return your cup to the wooden shelf and wipe the back of your neck, already craving something with flavor and warmth. Breakfast, thankfully, is next. The morning meal is largely similar to dinner. Rice, miso soup, a token vegetable side. But today's miso has mushrooms in it. This qualifies as festive. You sit cross-legged, grateful for food that doesn't require intense concentration or emotional resilience. Beside you, someone starts reciting a haiku about pickled radish. You wonder if he's okay. You also wonder what day of the week it is, before remembering that samurai training doesn't run on weeks. It runs on cycles of discipline, dawn, and digestion. After breakfast, it's time for a special session known as calligraphy sparring. This isn't as violent as it sounds. No one's dueling with ink brushes, though that would be impressive. Instead, you're tasked with copying a passage from a Zen proverb scroll onto handmade rice paper with a horsehair brush that has seen better centuries. You sit before your paper, dipping the brush with reverence, and begin to write. Each stroke must be intentional, fluid, and graceful. No pressure, except that a senior instructor is watching you with the intensity of someone guarding national treasure. Your first character looks promising. The second one, more like a startled frog. By the third, your ink has blotted, and the paper has curled up in protest. Still, there's something meditative about it. The rhythm of brush on paper, the faint sound of wind outside, the hushed breathing of those around you. It's the closest you've come all day to peace, until someone sneezes mid-kanji and splashes ink across their entire proverb. A soft gasp ripples through the room. The instructor sighs. Wabi-sabi, he murmurs. Beauty in imperfection. It's both a mercy and a warning. Then comes your favorite moment of every training day, the tea house break. You shuffle down a stone path flanked by flowering bushes into a small side structure where the youngest student monk serves tea. Green, frothy, astringent, and just bitter enough to remind you of your place in the cosmos. You sip it carefully, feeling it warm your insides and mellow the jittery tension in your fingers. Outside the window, a dragonfly hovers, then darts away like it forgot something. Someone's folding an origami frog. Someone else is asleep, upright, with eyes technically open. No one disturbs them. The break ends all too soon. It always does. But you rise slower this time, more grounded somehow. Like the tea has anchored you back into your body. You bow to the server. He bows lower. Then it's off to the next lesson. Armor etiquette. A topic that is as specific and serious as it sounds. Your task: to learn how to bow, kneel, and maneuver while wearing the full torso plate and skirt of a samurai's lamellar armor. It's not the full gear, no helmets or weapons yet, but it's heavy enough to make you question every vertebra in your spine. You strap it on, it squeaks, you squat, it pinches. You try to kneel and accidentally trap your hakama in the hip plates. The instructor watches silently, scribbling notes. You suspect those notes are mostly just drawings of disappointed eyebrows. Still, you press on. You learn the angle of a bow must change based on what rank you're addressing. 30 degrees for a fellow trainee, 45 for an instructor, and 70 for the shogun, should you somehow survive long enough to meet him. Bowing too little is disrespectful. Bowing too deeply is suspicious. Historians still argue whether one forgotten bow led to a decade-long feud between two clans, or if it was just bad swordplay and worse rumors. Eventually, you get it. Not perfectly, but you manage a squat bow pivot sequence that doesn't end in physical collapse or cloth entanglement. The instructor gives a tiny nod. You take that as a win. The rhythm of the day beats onward like a steady taiko drum. Your muscles hum with that special kind of soreness that suggests progress, or perhaps chronic regret. No matter. You march, more or less voluntarily, into the next phase of the routine: weapon care. You're led to a quiet side building, cedar-scented and dimly lit, where shelves hold racks of practice swords and, far more reverently, the real blades, the katana, the wakizashi, and the tanto. Today, you're allowed to handle a genuine katana, not for sparring, but for cleaning. This is not a chore. It's a ceremony, a sacred bond between warrior and weapon. You sit on a low cushion, cloth laid out before you like an altar. The katana is unsheathed. Slowly, with care, revealing a blade that gleams even in soft light. You don't breathe too loud. It feels like you're sharing space with a living thing. Using soft paper, choji oil, and a tiny powder ball that looks suspiciously like something from a dollhouse tea party. You clean the blade, gently rubbing along the curve with the patience of someone petting a noble, slightly dangerous cat. You're told this practice prevents rust, but it's also symbolic. A clear sword reflects a clear mind. Historians still argue whether samurai spent more time polishing their blades or their egos, but either way, This is where your focus sharpens. Next comes the scabbard inspection. You examine the lacquered sheath for cracks or warping. Lightly oil the interior, and then, finally, return the sword with a bow that now, thanks to armor etiquette class, doesn't resemble a collapsing houseplant. One student's blade cleaning takes so long that he misses the following lesson. He says it was an extended meditation. You suspect he just really needed a nap and cleverly disguised it as reverence. Following this almost spiritual interlude, it's time for a completely different test. Rural terrain drills. This lesson involves no temples, no scrolls, and absolutely no tea. You're marched into the woods behind the training compound and assigned a simple task. Walk silently across a leaf-strewn path, then crawl under low bamboo poles, then hop from stone to stone across a creek, all while balancing a small pebble on the back of your left hand. Why? To train coordination, stealth, and frustration tolerance, mostly. It's all very practical if you ever need to sneak through enemy land while playing a game of Pebble Jenga. The first part goes decently, until a bird startles you and you slap your own hand out of instinct. Pebble down. Start over. The second part, crawling beneath bamboo, leaves your hair full of dry leaves and your knees full of judgment. By the third crawl, you've gained 3 new mosquito bites and a healthy mistrust of ants. Crossing the creek is your final challenge. The stones are just slippery enough to threaten your dignity. You make it halfway, glance at the pebble, still there, and then fate intervenes in the form of a wayward frog leaping from a nearby lily pad. You flinch. Your hand tilts. Goodbye, pebble. Still, no one falls in today, which counts as a victory. One student loses his sandal to the creek and pretends it was intentional. A lesson in detachment, he says solemnly. Back at the compound, you change into dry clothes, assuming you brought extras, and head into the mid-afternoon philosophy circle. This session takes place in a shaded courtyard under a towering pine tree. Everyone sits cross-legged on straw mats. An elder monk, whose eyebrows alone could host a TED Talk, leads the discussion. Today's theme, impermanence and the warrior's path. He speaks slowly, with long pauses, inviting you to consider that everything, from cherry blossoms to breath to battle, is fleeting. You're encouraged to reflect on your fears, your purpose, your legacy. Or, at the very least, stay awake long enough to nod wisely. Someone asks whether it's cowardly to avoid combat. The monk smiles. There is no honor in foolish death, he replies, but plenty in knowing when not to swing your sword. Someone else asks why warriors are expected to write poetry. The monk chuckles. Because if you must kill, you'd better understand beauty first. It's unexpectedly soothing. You start to wonder whether you're becoming centered. Then someone's stomach growls. Loudly. The moment passes, but the lesson lingers. From there, it's time for compassion training. Yes, that's a thing. A true samurai, you're told, must be as capable of kindness as they are of combat. So today, you'll be caring for the compound's elderly horse, a creature named Mochi who has clearly seen things. You're assigned to brush his coat, clean his hooves, and lead him on a short walk. At first, he's indifferent, then mildly cooperative. By the end, you're pretty sure you're friends. The brushing is rhythmic, almost meditative. The horse snorts contentedly. You talk to him, because who else will listen? And tell him about the pebble drill, the frog, the calligraphy disaster. He just chews hay and occasionally nods, which feels validating. One student gets sneezed on. Another is followed around by a chicken that apparently lives in the same stable. You're not sure what lesson that's teaching, but it's adorable. The instructor nods approvingly at your horse-walking form and mutters something about balanced heart, balanced sword. You beam with pride. Mochi sneezes on your sleeve. Balance indeed. Later in the day, you gather with your cohort for what's simply called evening flow. It's part physical cool-down, part introspective journaling, and part sleepy stretching. You begin with slow, circular movements, shoulder rolls, gentle lunges, wrist rotations, set to the sound of bamboo wind chimes and a flute playing somewhere in the distance. Your limbs ache, but in that earned-it kind of way. Then comes the journaling portion. You're handed a brush and fresh paper and prompted to write down something you learned today. You scribble, "Don't trust frogs," or calligraphy brushes, but trust tea. Not exactly zen, but honest. The final part of evening flow is shared silence. Just 5 minutes, no words, no movement. You close your eyes, listen to the wind, the rustle of robes, the distant neigh of a horse. Someone nearby begins snoring. No one minds. As dusk deepens, you're summoned one last time to the dojo, lit now with lanterns for a brief closing ritual. You kneel in a semicircle with your fellow trainees. The head instructor appears, his robe flawless, his expression unreadable. He doesn't say much, just a few words of encouragement, a nod to the challenges ahead, and a reminder. The sword is not for rage, it is for balance. Then you bow together, lower than usual, holding the pose for a long, quiet moment. The ritual ends. You rise. Someone cracks a knee. Someone else quietly farts. You all pretend it didn't happen. Walking back to your sleeping quarters, the stars are already out. You glance up at them. Wonder who else is training tonight, across the mountains or seas. You arrive at your straw mat and sit. You've made it through another day. Barely. Probably wouldn't have lasted a week in real samurai training, but somehow you're still standing. You exhale. Only 5 more years to go. The stars above are gentle, pricking through the ink-wash sky like tiny brush strokes on black silk. But sleep is still a ways off, because tonight you'll experience what is perhaps the least glamorous and most overlooked part of samurai life: night watch. Every trainee takes a turn, and tonight the honor is yours. A senior instructs you with a ceremonious nod and a single word. Observe. Simple, slightly ominous. You're handed a bamboo staff, not for combat, but for tapping the ground to stay alert, and a small lantern with flickering light that does more to cast shadows than dispel them. You're told your job is to walk the outer perimeter of the compound at a slow pace. No speaking, no humming, no accidental naps against the tool shed. The cool night air makes your breath visible, and your footsteps crunch softly on the gravel paths. At first, this feels like a punishment wrapped in poetic mystery. But slowly, your senses adjust. You begin to notice the rustle of pine branches, the chirp of crickets, and somewhere, faintly, the hoot of an owl. You pass the sleeping quarters, the training yard, the shrine to Inari. Each step reinforces a sense of presence. There's no phone to check, no podcast to distract. Just you, the cold and the quiet. Halfway through your watch, you see something move in the shadows. A small animal, maybe a tanuki, or an ambitious cat. You freeze. Grip your staff with one hand, lantern with the other. It's a chicken. You nod solemnly at the interloper and continue on. The whole exercise is less about protection and more about mindfulness. Some historians debate whether samurai actually stood regular night watch, or if this was more common among lower retainers. But either way, your eyes are drooping by the final lap. Eventually, your replacement arrives, bleary-eyed and already regretting everything. You hand off the lantern and return to your sleeping mat, which feels as luxurious as a royal futon after your chilly stroll. But don't get too comfortable, because the rooster will be up in just a few hours, and with it comes the next part of your endless routine: communal cleaning. Now, this might sound like a gentle morning chore, maybe a little sweeping, some dusting. Maybe you imagine it'll be a little like a Studio Ghibli montage. You poor, naive soul. Communal cleaning at the dojo is less relaxing soundtrack and cherry blossoms and more dust-based boot camp. Everyone lines up at sunrise, cloths in hand, ready to clean everything from the weapons racks to the outdoor privy. You're assigned the garden path, specifically to rake and align the gravel into perfectly straight lines with the help of a rake that seems determined to betray you. Every time you finish a neat little section, the wind shifts. Leaves fall. A squirrel darts through. You sigh, start again. Next comes the tatami room. You help lift and beat the mats, sending clouds of dust into the air. There's no such thing as an allergy exemption in samurai school. You sneeze so violently, a passing monk blesses you mid-step. A fellow student spills an ink bottle and tries to cover it with his sleeve. You both get caught. There is a lecture about responsibility, followed by additional sweeping. You also help scrub the courtyard stones, which have apparently absorbed centuries of mystery grime. The brushes provided are made from what you suspect is the world's stiffest straw. Your arms feel like soba noodles by the end. And yet, despite the grumbling, the blisters, the complete lack of mop technology, there's something quietly satisfying about it all. The dojo gleams. The path glistens. Even the usually grumpy rooster seems to strut more proudly over the newly cleaned stones. And, just as you think you're done, someone reminds you it's also your turn to write the morning proverb. This tradition rotates among students. A small chalkboard is placed at the main gate each morning, bearing a line of wisdom or reflection for all who enter. No pressure. You scramble for something meaningful. You think back to your night watch, to the chicken, to your rake-based trauma. Eventually, you scrawl in careful kanji. Even a crooked path looks straight in moonlight. People nod as they pass. Someone says, In that way people do when they're not sure they get it, but want to seem profound. Mission accomplished. After breakfast, which today involves pickled plums, miso soup, and the spiritual reckoning that is fermented bean paste, you're ushered into a more cerebral exercise, oral history training. You sit cross-legged while an elder recounts tales from the clan's past. There's no script, just memory, woven with rhythm, silence, and carefully chosen detail. Today's story is about a long-forgotten retainer who once challenged a duel during a lightning storm because he believed it would bring celestial approval. The fight was canceled because both opponents were struck by lightning. They survived. Their hair never recovered. You listen, wide-eyed, absorbing the layers: truth, myth, and the curious in between. These stories serve as both entertainment and instruction. They remind you that while war is bloody, legacy is shaped by how we're remembered, and sometimes by how ridiculous our choices were. After the tale, you are asked to retell it, in your own words, to a younger trainee. It's a test of memory and voice. You exaggerate the lightning just a little. Maybe the hair was on fire. Maybe they developed the first perm in Japan. Who's to say? The elders smile. That's the point. History lives best when it breathes. Then it's time for herbal training. Not the exciting kind that involves poisons or miracle cures. This is basic field medicine. You're brought to a shaded grove where a soft-spoken instructor teaches you to identify local plants with medicinal uses. You learn to distinguish wild ginger from look-alike roots, how to brew a sleep tea, and what leaves to chew for stomach aches after eating too much rice. Not that you'd ever do such a thing again. One plant, a squat little bush with pale flowers, is explained as useful for wounds. Also good in pickles, the instructor adds, deadpan. A few herbs are passed around to smell. One smells like feet, another, oddly, like roasted chestnuts. A third causes a classmate to sneeze 12 times in a row, setting off a chain reaction that leaves everyone sniffling. You're taught how to grind ingredients with a mortar and pestle, how to bandage a minor cut with strips of linen soaked in healing paste, and, most surprisingly, how to whistle through a reed in case you're lost and need help. Historians argue whether samurai truly learned medical skills or if this was the work of their attendants. But here, every trainee is expected to know how to treat themselves or their comrades on the battlefield. By now, you're tired, sore, and smell like a mix of crushed leaves and boiled barley. But there's one final lesson today: the tea of stillness. It's not a ceremony exactly, more of a closing meditation involving warm tea, no talking, and the option to cry softly if you need to. Everyone gathers under the pine tree again. Small cups are passed out. The tea is grassy, slightly bitter, and soul-hugging. You've survived another stretch of this beautiful, exhausting routine. You've cleaned toilets, whispered to horses, outstared chickens, and invented proverbs under duress. And somehow, in all of this, you've changed. Even if your legs are cramping, as you rest your teacup gently on the stone slab beside you, a cool breeze moves through the courtyard like a slow exhale. No one speaks. You hear a crow call out from the tree line, followed by the faint rustling of pine needles. The moment feels suspended, tranquil, slightly surreal, as if the dojo has temporarily slid outside the laws of time. But of course, time never truly stops. Your instructor approaches with the sort of quiet authority that can only mean one thing: archery drills. And not just any archery. This is kyudo, the way of the bow, where hitting the target is honestly the least important part. You're led to the archery range, which looks more like a Zen garden than a field of competition. There's sand underfoot, raked into perfect ripples, and the targets are simple straw bundles placed at a humble distance. You line up alongside other trainees, each holding the traditional asymmetrical yumi bow, taller than a grown man with an elegance that makes your modern compound bow look like a toddler's slingshot. The ritual begins. First, you bow. Then you kneel. Then you breathe. Very specifically, very slowly. Each movement is deliberate. Knocking the arrow, raising the bow, drawing it back in a motion that feels more like a slow dance than a martial art. You hold, trembling slightly. The world narrows to a breath, a heartbeat, a line of intent. And then, release. The arrow sails. You miss the target entirely. It lands with a soft thunk in the moss a few feet short. You bow again. No one laughs. That's not the point. Kyudo isn't about dominance. It's about discipline, posture, inner calm. Some say it's a moving meditation disguised as war prep. Others say it was a samurai's version of therapy. Historians still debate just how integral archery was in later samurai periods, when firearms had begun to replace the bow. But here, in the dojo, the bow is sacred, as much an instrument of philosophy as of battle. Your second shot is closer. By the fourth, you hit the edge of the straw. By the sixth, your fingers ache, your back twinges, and you feel weirdly euphoric. You've now earned your next reward/challenge, calligraphy practice. You're handed a brush, a sheet of rice paper, and a small ink stone. The ink has to be ground manually with water, a task that feels a bit like stirring paint made from ancient secrets and subtle guilt. Your task: copy a classic poem, stroke for stroke. Simple, right? You quickly discover that holding the brush correctly is like trying to grip a jellyfish with poise. Your first character looks like it's having an existential crisis. The second resembles a beetle caught in a wind tunnel. The instructor offers no correction, just a gentle that somehow contains both judgment and encouragement. The room is silent except for the soft scraping of ink and the occasional frustrated sigh. You watch an older trainee complete an entire scroll of flawless characters that look like they were written by a bamboo spirit with tenure. You try again. By the fourth attempt, something clicks. The brush glides more smoothly. Your lines still wobble like they've had one too many sips of sake, but they wobble with grace. You're told to leave your best attempt on the wall. You squint at your options and choose the one that looks least like a startled squid. The scroll joins a row of others, some breathtaking, some barely decipherable. Together, they form a chorus of effort, and that's the point. After lunch, simmered vegetables, barley rice, and a humble miso broth, you're herded to a part of the compound you've only glimpsed before, the forge. Now, you're not forging anything. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But today, you'll assist the blacksmith by stoking the fires, preparing charcoal, and hauling water. It's smoky, loud, and oddly beautiful. Sparks fly like fireflies having a rave. The smell is a heady mix of hot iron, pine resin, and sweat. You're shown how steel is tempered, heated to a glowing orange, then plunged into cold water with a hiss that sounds like the forge sighing. The smith holds up a half-finished blade, explains the delicate layering of steel, and how the famed katana's curve comes not from shaping but from controlled tension as it cools. You nod, soot-faced and awestruck. He asks you to fan the coals while he works. You do this with all the solemnity of someone cradling a dragon's breath. As you watch him polish a blade to an almost mirror shine, he tells you an old saying. The sword is the soul of the samurai. You believe him. But also, you'd like to point out that the samurai's soul apparently requires a lot of elbow grease. Later that afternoon, it's time for horse tending. You were expecting riding. You were mistaken. Instead, you're introduced to a sleepy brown horse named Miso, who regards you with the indifferent expression of a civil servant on a Friday. You're taught to brush her coat, clean her hooves, and muck out her stall. It's not glamorous work, but it's steady, rhythmic, even soothing, until she sneezes directly into your face. Some scholars believe samurai cavalry spent more time caring for their horses than actually riding them. And honestly, based on the effort required just to comb Miso's tail, you're inclined to agree. The stable master teaches you how to lead her with minimal effort. Be the mountain, not the wind, he says cryptically. Miso ignores you, but by the end, she follows your lead. For 3 full steps, a triumph. As the sun begins to sink, casting long amber shadows, your body aches in places you didn't know had muscles. Your hair smells like charcoal. Your calligraphy still haunts you a little. But you've survived another samurai afternoon, which means you've earned drumroll, please, laundry duty. Yes, the final indignity. You and a few others haul baskets to the stream and begin scrubbing your training clothes on stones, using a pungent root-based soap that smells faintly of citrus and shame. The water is freezing. Your hands go numb. You nearly drop a sock into the current and chase it 3 meters downstream before a frog jumps out and startles you backward into the shallows. It is not your proudest moment. You return soaked, mildly bruised, but holding that sock like a war trophy. Everyone hangs their garments on long bamboo poles to dry. You sit beside them, steaming slightly in the cool air, and watch the last light fade. A senior pats your shoulder and says, "Good job today." You smile through your shivers. Maybe you won't last a full day in a samurai's life, but tonight you've come closer than most. You shuffle into the courtyard as the cool noon light bathes the dojo in a softer glow. Today, routine demands a pause from the usual martial austerity, and instead, you join a motley group of poets, calligraphers, and half-retired warriors who decide that lunch is the perfect time for a gentle immersion into the realm of verse. This isn't the kind of fighting that tests your reflexes, but rather one that tests your ability to nod sagely at metaphors you're barely sure you understand. The long wooden tables, usually lined with bowls of rice and miso soup, are now adorned with lacquered scrolls and ink cups. The men and women around you have traded their sharpened gazes for pensive eyes, as if the clattering of swords could be replaced with the subtle sound of a brush on paper. They gather in low clusters, murmuring in measured tones about the fleeting beauty of cherry blossoms, the impermanence of morning dew, and the serenity of a sunset over a distant mountain village. You settle down at one of the tables, feeling the worn texture of the tatami under your feet, the kind of softness that belies the weight of countless years of unspoken tradition. At first, you feel awkward. You watch as a fellow trainee, whose usual gruff exterior has been softened by a touch of artistic reverence, unrolls a delicate scroll. The calligraphy dances in delicate strokes, each line flowing with a grace that contrasts sharply with your own clumsy attempts at alignment during the previous calligraphy session. Beside him, an older poet, whose voice has softened with time, recites a haiku about the silent sorrow of a withering plum tree. His words are measured, like the steady beat of a drum echoing in an ancient temple. You find yourself nodding along, even though the exact meaning slips away before it can settle. A bowl of rice is placed gently before you. The familiar staple transforms in this setting into more than food. It becomes a symbol of life's continuity and fragility. A small dish of pickled vegetables sits alongside, their vibrant colors like punctuation marks to an unspoken poem. You take a tentative bite, finding that the sour tang mingles with the quiet musings resonating in the air, stirring in you a vague sense of wonder. The subtle flavor of miso soup, rich and savory, brings to your mind the idea of a liquid poem. Each sip a verse, each aroma a stanza that speaks of earth and rain and the serene flow of time. The conversation flows as slowly as the tea that is poured into small, perfectly warmed cups. A young poet, with ink still smudged on his calloused fingers, leans forward to share his latest composition. His words paint images of solitary mountains and wandering streams, but when he speaks of the transient nature of the wind, you can almost sense the breeze intertwining with the rustling leaves. You try to decipher his metaphors, to capture the emotion behind each syllable, but it remains just out of reach, teasing you like the tip of a katana barely visible in the dim light of dawn. In your heart, you appreciate his earnestness, even if you're not entirely certain whether his poetic imagery is a profound commentary on life or merely a clever ruse to veil the boredom of routine. A nearby poet stands and reads aloud. His deep voice carries over the murmuring crowd as he relates an epistle on the transient beauty of a wisteria garden in bloom. You lean in, straining to catch every word, the sound of his voice smooth and rhythmic, a lullaby for weary warriors. As he recites, you notice the way his eyes reflect both the solemnity of a battle fought long ago and the light-hearted mischief of a man who dares to find joy in small things. You pause to consider this duality, the ancient notion that even the fiercest fighter might harbor a secret love for delicate verse. It is, after all, one of the most bittersweet contradictions in the samurai soul. Between the recitations, there is light banter, subtle, teasing remarks that hint at the underlying humor in tradition. A fellow trainee jokes that his calligraphy is so fluid that even the ink blushes when it meets the paper, eliciting a few soft chuckles. Another adds that the poetry of the warriors is as refined as their swordplay, though you suspect the intended meaning might be that both are equally dangerous in the wrong hands. The air is thick with the scent of incense and freshly brewed tea, a combination that softens even the hardest of hearts and makes the moments feel as if they could last forever. Yet, every now and then, a sharp laugh or a gentle ribbing reminds you that beneath the lofty verses there is a humanity that is both tender and hilariously imperfect. You remember that samurai were not solely defined by their martial prowess. They were trained in the arts, music, poetry, and painting, believing that a balanced life required both the blade and the brush. This very idea, that art could sharpen the spirit as much as a sword could, has been passed down through generations. Historians still argue whether the refined poetic traditions among samurai originated from the pressures of unending warfare, or from a cultivated desire to temper the soul with beauty and wisdom. In either case, there is no denying that the aesthetics of life, however gentle they might appear, are woven into the fabric of every disciplined day. As the conversation drifts toward the subject of impermanence, a favorite motif today, you find yourself mentally cataloging the details of your own morning trials and afternoon labors. You recall the strange, delicate moment during tea practice when even the sound of someone's quiet cough seemed to carry the weight of centuries. You consider how, like a fleeting line in a haiku, the day's lessons have merged into a single, fluid experience. A smile tugs at your lips, partly from the bitter taste of the miso, and partly from a sudden, inexplicable recognition that, in this transient assembly of words and shared silences, you too contribute to an unfolding poem. One of the poets, a gentle soul with wispy hair that seems to float around his head like a halo of old parchment, turns to address the group. His words are tender yet precise as he speaks of the ephemeral dance of sunlight on damp stone, a metaphor that draws a collective sigh from those listening. You close your eyes for a moment, absorbing the imagery and feeling through the vibrations of his voice, the entwined destinies of poets and warriors alike. A subtle thought forms that even in the cold discipline of combat, there remains an undercurrent of softness, a reminder that every fierce heart has its moments of vulnerability. In the midst of this reflective ambiance, a quirky detail emerges. A particularly bold trainee, known more for his unconventional interpretations than his swordsmanship, pulls out a small, hand-carved flute and begins a spontaneous tune. The melody is simple, yet strangely uplifting, interspersed with light trills that mimic the chirping of birds. As the notes weave through the air, you can't help but feel that even the most austere environment is susceptible to moments of unplanned artistry. The others smile appreciatively, and for a few precious minutes, the rigid structure of the day loosens its grip. There is a soft laughter that follows, warm and communal, as if the moment is a secret all the warriors share but rarely speak of aloud. Returning to your meal, you notice the delicate interplay of flavors on your tongue, a harmony of salty miso, sweet glazes on fish, and a subtle tanginess from pickled vegetables. Each bite carries with it a reminder of the natural world outside the dojo, a field of blooming wildflowers in the spring, a quiet mountain stream mirroring a cloudless sky in the summer. You are fully aware that even the simplest meal, when shared amidst thoughtful discourse, transforms into a multisensory experience. Every flavor seems imbued with the poetry of the day, a culinary verse that refreshes both body and spirit. Throughout this leisurely interlude, there is an unspoken challenge at work. The poets, with their soft tongues and meticulous pens, expect more than mere participation. They demand authenticity. You find yourself trying to parse the layered meanings behind each line, formulating responses that are thoughtful and sincere. At moments, you interject with a comment that is half humorous and half profound, eliciting knowing smiles from the more seasoned members of the group. Their eyes twinkle with amusement and encouragement, as if they recognize your earnest effort to bridge the gap between martial rigor and artistic wonder. There's an undercurrent of rivalry, too, a gentle contest of who can express the deepest insight with the fewest words. One scholar, known for his pithy remonstrations against the vagaries of fate, recites a couplet about the brief lifespan of dew on a sakura petal. Another counters with a witty remark about the eternal struggle between the blade and the brush. You try to follow, nodding at the appropriate intervals, yet you secretly worry that your own poetic sensibilities might be as muddled as your calligraphy earlier that day. It is then that a kindly mentor leans over, murmuring, "In poetry, as in life, the beauty is often found in the attempt, not the perfection." His words settle over you like a warm blanket, and you allow yourself a small moment of reassurance. As the midday repast dwindles, the conversation slowly transitions from lyrical musings to practical lessons. The poets begin to share their personal anecdotes, humble memories of early training, quiet moments of rebellion against rigid instruction, and surprising tales of how a well-timed laugh once diffused a potentially violent conflict during a tumultuous campaign. One story, in particular, stands out, a tale of a renowned samurai who, rather than engage in a duel, resolved a bitter dispute by challenging his opponent to a contest of haiku. The absurdity of that challenge, two fierce warriors trading terse lines of verse instead of clashing steel, provokes a soft round of laughter among the group. You savor the irony, recognizing that even in a world governed by strict codes of honor, the human heart still seeks moments of levity and expression. The air grows gradually warmer as the sun climbs higher, and a languid, almost dreamlike stillness envelops the courtyard. You take a deep breath, feeling as if you are inhaling not just air, but the very essence of the day's poetry. With each exhale, you release a bit of the tension that had accumulated from the morning's relentless drills. There is an almost tangible softness now, a serene camaraderie born out of shared hardship and the mutual pursuit of beauty in unexpected places. Time seems to slow. The poets exchange quiet glances, their expressions unreadable yet profoundly intimate. as if each knew that this very moment was a rare respite from the ceaseless rigor of discipline. Even you find yourself caught up in the calm, watching a stray petal drift lazily across the table, its journey a silent ode to impermanence. You are aware that, beyond this gentle reprieve, the day still holds its share of discipline and duty. But for now, in the quiet interplay of whispered verses and delicate flavors, you allow yourself to simply be. You contribute what you can. A small, unpolished thought about how the taste of miso reminds you of distant memories of home, or a brief observation on the way the light plays off a lacquered tray. In sharing these moments, you feel both the weight of tradition and the lightness of art intertwining, like two notes in a timeless melody. The session winds down gradually. As the poets gather their scrolls and pack away their ink, the gentle murmur of conversation fades into a reflective silence. You remain seated for a few lingering minutes, absorbing every nuance of the shared experience. In that quiet aftermath, you sense that you have not only nourished your body with a humble meal, but also fed your spirit with a taste of something ineffable, a poetic sustenance that will linger long after the flavors have faded. Finally, with a collective, unspoken understanding, the group disperses. The poets retreat back to their quarters, leaving you to contemplate the delicate balance between the fierce discipline of a warrior and the tender vulnerability of an artist. As you stand and straighten your worn yet comfortable training jai, you can't help but feel a subtle shift. Perhaps, in this world where daily rituals are as sharp as a freshly honed blade and as soft as a whispered verse, you are beginning to understand that there is beauty even in suffering. There is grace even in the relentless routine. You gather your belongings, offering one last courteous nod to a poet who catches your eye. A nod that says in its own quiet way, "Thank you for reminding me that this life, exhausting as it may be, is also filled with moments of unexpected art." With that, you step away from the table, carrying with you the quiet resonance of the verses and the taste of miso and memory. Though you may forever struggle with the finer points of poetic expression, you know that today, at least, your heart has been moved. And as you rejoin the flow of daily duty, you do so with a new awareness that even warriors can find solace in the gentle cadence of shared words, and a meal that tastes of both nourishment and delicate, bittersweet poetry. You've barely brushed the last flecks of rice from your kimono when the tranquility of poetry hour vanishes like fog on a sunlit pond. The bells toll, a low, sonorous chime that reverberates through the temple grounds. And just like that, you're snapped back to the hard edge of your samurai life. Your legs ache from the morning's endless kata. Your hand still smells faintly of ink and pickled radish. But there's no time to reflect. Now, it's armor time. And armor. Armor is awful. It begins innocently enough with the undergarments, simple, breathable layers of cotton meant to keep the heavier bits from scraping your skin raw. They do not succeed. Then come the sunnied, the shin guards, each tied with what feels like 77 cords that somehow end up either too tight or one breath from unraveling. You fumble with the knots as your instructor watches, arms folded, wearing the faint smile of someone who has watched this exact struggle for decades. There's a rhythm to donning the rest. High date for your thighs, kote for the arms, the do for your chest. You try to strike that perfect balance between mobility and protection, but end up waddling like a padded duck. The helmet, kabuto, is last. It's ornate, it's heavy, it smells like centuries of sweat. You put it on and immediately regret it. Breathing feels like an optional luxury. The moment the chin strap snaps into place, a fresh wave of claustrophobia washes over you. There's a reason you'll never see a samurai skip helmet day, though. Even the poetry guy. Now, fully armored, you step outside. The sun that once seemed friendly now scorches your metal plates, turning you into a walking oven. You shuffle to formation with the other trainees, each one radiating their own little heat bubble. It smells like iron, effort, and bad choices. A bee circles a few helmets, perhaps mistaking them for rival hives. No one dares move. You try not to blink too loudly. And then the marching starts. Not a casual stroll. No, this is full formation maneuvering across uneven terrain, in full gear, with a pace that suggests your instructor deeply resents your continued existence. Your legs, already jelly from the morning drills, now carry 30 extra pounds of misery. Every footfall reverberates up your spine. The kabuto rattles with each step, a subtle reminder that your skull is a percussion instrument today. The purpose of this? Endurance. Discipline. And because history tells us that battles weren't just 10 minutes of dramatic sword fights, they were hours, sometimes days, of marching, waiting, posturing, and then maybe finally, fighting. Historians still argue whether samurai armor was designed more for intimidation than actual protection. Some claim the elaborate crests and fearsome masks were meant to strike fear before the first blow. Others argue that the armor's weight and construction served as a practical balance between mobility and defense. Either way, you now deeply understand why dying of heat stroke might have been a respectable battlefield exit. Eventually, the march circles back to the courtyard. You're permitted to remove the kabuto. It's like cracking open a boiled egg. Your scalp tingles in the open air. You dare to flex your toes. Someone whispers, "I think my shin guards are permanently part of me now." You believe them. The instructor, still chipper for reasons unknown to mortal understanding, signals for a hydration break. A trainee collapses theatrically by the well, scooping water with cupped hands and whispering a prayer to the gods of cold beverages. You do the same, taking long gulps, the water dribbling down your chin and soaking into your collar. The taste is life itself. It's only been 30 minutes since you last drank, but it might as well have been a century. Around you, the others sprawl on benches and rocks, removing bits of armor to scratch mysterious itches and compare sweat patterns. One guy lifts his dew and lets out an audible sigh of relief. It sounds almost spiritual. As you wipe your face, a thought lingers. This was daily life. Every day, suit up. March, practice, sweat, repeat. And they did it without hydration tablets or ventilated athletic wear. No wonder the average samurai had calves of steel and a resting heart rate that would terrify a cardiologist. But your break is over before your pulse can slow. Time for combat drills. You strap everything back on with slightly more efficiency, if only because fear of repeating the earlier knot fiasco drives you to improved technique. Today's focus, Tate Waza, or shield techniques. Not all samurai fought with shields, but certain schools of combat incorporated them, especially in castle defense. You're handed a small, circular shield and a wooden training sword. It's heavier than it looks. When your partner strikes, it's like trying to deflect a kitchen table hurled by a determined ox. You stumble through the first few exchanges. Your shield thunks dully as it catches blows. Your wooden sword vibrates with each blocked strike. The armor, now resettled on your sore shoulders, creaks with disapproval every time you pivot. You miss a block and get thwacked in the rib. pain blossoms. That's one way to learn, your opponent says, not unkindly. You nod, resisting the urge to launch your shield across the courtyard like a discus. But slowly, your rhythm improves. You begin to anticipate strikes. You learn the weight of your own shield, how to let it absorb force instead of meeting it head-on. You realize that this, too, is part of the samurai's art. Not just how to strike, but how to endure. Not just how to move, but how to absorb pain with dignity. A fellow trainee even claps for you when you manage a clean block and counter in one fluid motion. Small victories count. There's a fringe tidbit your instructor shares in passing. Some samurai reportedly lined parts of their armor with hair from their own horses, believing it brought them luck and the spirit of the animal in battle. You wonder, briefly, if your armor has horse in it. It certainly smells like it might. Still, it's one of those strange human details that makes this world feel a little closer. Warriors clinging to superstition to armor their spirits just as much as their bodies. As the sun dips lower, casting the dojo in golden hues, the final drills end. Armor clangs as it's removed in a chaotic symphony. You peel yours off, layer by sticky layer, leaving behind little puddles of dignity on the wooden floor. Your shoulders scream. Your knees mutter threats. Your feet are not speaking to you at all. Still, as you hang your gear on its designated rack and stretch your arms toward the ceiling, there's a small bloom of pride. You did it. You lasted the day. Well, almost. The final test? Maintenance. Because samurai don't just wear armor, they care for it like it's a trusted companion. You're handed a rag and a tiny jar of oil. You begin wiping down the plates, removing grime, checking the cords for frays. The scent of metal polish fills the air. It's surprisingly meditative, this process. Each movement a slow reverence. You remember the old saying, "A samurai's soul lives in his katana, but his heart lives in his armor." Or maybe you just made that up. Either way, it sounds like something that belongs on a lacquered scroll. One of your peers hums softly while cleaning his helmet. Another complains that he found a beetle living inside his hay date. You try not to listen too closely. Your mind is fogging, tiredness wrapping itself around your brain like a warm, damp cloth. The armor is spotless now. You bow to it, as tradition dictates. It's a small gesture, but meaningful. A reminder that even tools deserve gratitude. Outside, the sky is lavender. Crickets begin their evening chorus. You, stiff and sweat-drenched, feel like a piece of tempura left too long in the fryer. But there's a quiet contentment beneath the exhaustion. You survived the suit-up, the drills, the march, the shield training. You even managed a moment of grace somewhere between the bruises and breathlessness. As you walk back toward the bathhouse, finally, blessedly, the last rays of sun flicker through the trees. You catch your reflection in a polished bit of armor resting on a bench. You look taller, stronger, perhaps even a bit wiser. Or maybe that's just the swelling from where you took a sword to the ribs earlier. Still, you give yourself a tiny, approving nod. Tomorrow, it starts all over again. But tonight, you made it. The path to the bathhouse winds gently between rows of camphor trees, their broad leaves rustling in the hush of evening. Your legs are so sore they've begun to protest with every step, launching tiny, angry messages to your brain. "Why are we still moving?" they cry. But there is a glimmer of hope ahead. Warm water, steam, soap, a brief but glorious erasure of the day's sweat, dust, and indignities. You shuffle past a stone lantern that glows softly from within. Somewhere to your left, a bird calls. 3 notes, mournful and unhurried. It's the kind of sound that makes you want to lie down in a field and forget all human obligations. But instead, you slip off your sandals and step inside the dimly lit entrance to the bathhouse. Your first reward? A basin of cool water to splash on your face and hands. The feeling is so good you let out an involuntary sigh, which earns you a smirk from a fellow trainee crouched at the next basin. He's already half out of his training clothes, which now lie in a sad, sweaty pile beside him. You follow suit, peeling each layer away like you're molting. Inside the bath itself, the steam hangs thick and fragrant with cedarwood. The water is warm, but not scalding, just enough to coax your muscles into quiet surrender. You lower yourself in slowly, inch by blessed inch, until you're submerged up to your shoulders. The entire world disappears in the ripples. If this is a samurai's reward, then you finally understand why anyone signs up for the job. Someone nearby murmurs a haiku under his breath. Another splashes lazily, probably attempting to wash his armpits with one hand while sipping tea with the other. No one speaks loudly. No one needs to. The bath is not just for cleaning the body, but the spirit. Even the most rigid warriors soften here, their shoulders sloping lower with every exhale. A fringe detail you might not have expected. Some samurai, especially those of higher rank, wrote their wills after bathing when their minds were clearest. A morbid habit, maybe, but also deeply pragmatic. Historians still argue whether this practice was more about humility or a strategic moment of calm clarity. Either way, you find yourself oddly contemplative in the water, wondering what today's version of your will might read. To whom it may concern, please feed my cat and never, ever let me wear shin guards again. Eventually, the bath's warmth begins to turn your muscles to noodles. You hoist yourself out with the grace of a soggy futon and wrap a thin cotton towel around your waist. A final rinse at the standing shower stall, where cold water from a bamboo spout delivers a bracing slap to your senses. And you're done. Clean. Free. Temporarily unburdened. Back in your shared quarters, the lamps have been lit. The room is filled with the soft rustle of futons being unrolled, garments folded, conversations drifting toward silence. You pick your corner, spread your bedding with care, and sink down. The woven mat beneath you feels like a cloud compared to everything else you've endured today. Dinner comes in the form of rice, pickled vegetables, and a small bowl of miso soup. You eat slowly, every bite a sleepy ritual. A couple of your peers chat about sword grips and calligraphy strokes. Someone mentions a duel happening next week. You nod, chewing mechanically, barely tracking the conversation. Your mind is already half asleep. Then, like clockwork, the room quiets. Lamps are dimmed one by one. The outside world hushes with it. You lie on your futon, staring at the ceiling, letting your limbs sink into the tatami as if they've never been asked to move before. The air smells of pine and a hint of incense. Someone snores. Another mumbles in their sleep, likely mid-dream about misplacing their katana. And you? You replay the day in slow motion, waking up to temple bells, the sticky effort of armor, the agony of drills, the sweetness of clean water, the bath, the weight of the helmet, the satisfaction of blocking one solid strike. It's not just about surviving the samurai's morning routine. It's about making peace with its rhythm, enduring the discomforts to glimpse the discipline, laughing at your own suffering in small doses, not because you're weak, but because even strong warriors know humor is armor, too. You think back to that old saying about warriors rising with the sun. Now, you understand why they never mentioned what happens after lunch. Probably because they were all too sore to talk about it. You shift onto your side. The floor creaks beneath you like a lullaby. Sleep approaches, gentle as mist over a koi pond. Still, before we let you drift off entirely, let's take a moment to slow things down even more. Because you've earned it. You're here now, lying still, the last of the day falling away like petals in a quiet stream. The air is cool on your skin, still faintly scented with cedar from the bathhouse. Your limbs, heavy but no longer aching, settle deeper into the futon, as if the mat itself is rising up to hold you. Around you the room breathes. The paper walls whisper faint creaks as the night settles in. Somewhere outside, a bamboo fountain tips, empties, resets with a soft clack. Let your thoughts quiet. You've done enough. There are no more drills, no more armor straps, no more splinters to dodge on the dojo floor. Let your breath find its own rhythm now. Slow, soft, steady. In, outside. Each one a wave against a distant shore. The world of the samurai, with its rigid routines and strange beauty, begins to fade from view. You're not marching anymore. You're floating. You are not clad in iron and obligation, but wrapped in softness and ease. The room is dim. Your mind, dimmer still, pleasantly blurred at the edges. Let it be. Let everything be. Maybe you made it through the day. Maybe you stumbled through it. But none of that matters now. You're here. You're safe. You're resting. So close your eyes if you haven't already. Let the sounds of the past dissolve into stillness. No more training. No more effort. Just a long, peaceful night ahead. Good night, samurai.